The wind screamed through the mountain pass like the voices of 1,000 forgotten souls. Snow fell in sheets so thick that the world had become nothing but endless white, a canvas of winter's fury that erased all borders between earth and sky. Marcus Thorne pulled his coat tighter, though the cold meant nothing to him. It hadn't for 300 years. His horse Midnight trudged forward with the kind of stubborn determination only a creature who trusted its rider completely could muster. The animal's breath came in great plumes of steam, each exhale a small prayer against the storm. Marcus leaned forward, patting the horse's ice-crusted neck with a gentleness that would have surprised anyone who knew what he truly was. "Just a little further, old friend," he murmured, though he had no idea if that was true. The Colorado Rockies in winter were beautiful and merciless in equal measure. Marcus had crossed these mountains more times than he could count over the past 3 years. 3 years since he'd walked away from everything. 3 years since he'd abdicated a throne most men would kill to possess. 3 years of searching for something he wasn't sure existed. Redemption. The word tasted strange even in his thoughts. Could a creature like him ever truly find it? Could 3 centuries of darkness be washed away by a few years of wandering, of helping strangers, of refusing to give in to the hunger that still whispered in his veins every single day? Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, and the memories came flooding back as they always did. They were never far from the surface. Time didn't dull pain when you had eternity to remember. He saw her face. Elena. Beautiful, terrible Elena with her raven hair and eyes like midnight itself. She had found him in a tavern in Boston in 1573, a simple shipping merchant with a simple life. She had smiled at him across a crowded room, and in that smile he had seen his entire future. He'd been such a fool. Their courtship had been brief and intense. She had spoken of eternal love, of never being parted, of a bond that would transcend death itself. Marcus, young and desperately in love, had believed every word. When she'd invited him to her estate on the outskirts of the city, he'd gone willingly, eagerly. He remembered the bite, the searing pain as her fangs pierced his throat, the feeling of his life draining away, being replaced by something else, something cold and hungry and wrong. And then her laughter. Cruel and mocking as he'd writhed on the floor of her chamber, his body transforming into something he'd never asked to become. "You're mine now," she'd whispered against his ear. "Forever and always, my darling Marcus, my beautiful creation." But forever hadn't lasted long for Elena. Within a year, she'd grown bored with him, bored with his questions, his guilt, his desperate attempts to cling to his humanity. She'd left him one night, without a word, abandoning him to figure out what he'd become on his own. The years that followed had been a blur of confusion and horror. Marcus had learned to hunt, learned to kill, learned to become the very thing he'd feared in childhood stories. He'd told himself it was survival, that he had no choice, that the hunger was too strong to resist. And then somehow he'd become a king. The vampire courts were complex hierarchies built on power and fear. Marcus had been strong, stronger than most. His maker's blood had given him abilities others envied. And when the previous king of the Western Territories had challenged him to combat, Marcus had won. He hadn't wanted the crown. But in the world of vampires, refusing power was the same as accepting death. So he'd ruled. For 250 years, he'd sat on a throne of bones and shadows, presiding over a kingdom of the damned. He'd been fair as far as vampire kings went. He'd forbidden unnecessary killing. He'd tried to maintain order to prevent his kind from drawing too much attention from the humans who outnumbered them thousands to one. But every night when he returned to his cold, empty castle, he'd felt the weight of what he'd become. Every face of every victim haunted him. Every drop of blood on his hands stained his soul a little darker. 50 years ago, everything had changed. An old Apache shaman had been brought before him, captured by some of his more reckless subjects who'd been hunting too close to tribal lands. The old man should have been terrified. Instead, he'd looked at Marcus with eyes that saw through all the centuries of accumulated power and pride, straight down to the broken boy who'd been turned against his will. "You carry great darkness," the shaman had said in a voice like wind through canyon stones. But inside that darkness, a small light still flickers, the light of the man you once were. Marcus had leaned forward on his throne, intrigued despite himself. "And what would you know of what I once was, old man?" The shaman had smiled, a gentle expression that held no fear. "I know that no creature truly chooses to be a monster. I know that redemption is possible for any soul brave enough to seek it. There is no redemption for what I am." Marcus had said, the words hollow even to his own ears. "There is always redemption," the shaman had replied. but it comes at a price. You must be willing to sacrifice everything, your power, your immortality, everything you are. Only true love, freely given and freely received, can break a curse as old as yours. When you love someone so purely that you want nothing from them except their happiness, when you choose their freedom over your own desires, then, and only then, can you become human again. Marcus had released the old man that night, had given him safe passage back to his people. And then he'd sat in his throne room for hours, those words echoing in his mind. True love, freely given. He'd thought he'd known love with Elena, but that hadn't been love. It had been obsession, possession, manipulation. She'd never seen him as a person, only as a thing to be owned. Could he find it real love? The kind the shaman spoke of. Marcus had made his decision that very night. He'd called his council together and abdicated, had walked away from 3 centuries of power and left it all behind. Most of his subjects had thought him mad. Some had tried to stop him. But Marcus was still the strongest among them, and when he'd made it clear he would kill anyone who stood in his way, they'd let him go. For 50 years he'd wandered. He'd taught himself to survive on animal blood instead of human. The hunger never fully went away, but he'd learned to control it, to master it the way he'd mastered so many other aspects of his cursed existence. He'd helped people where he could, saved travelers from bandits, rescued children from burning buildings, pulled drowning men from rivers. Small acts of kindness that could never make up for centuries of darkness, but were all he had to offer. And he'd searched for that pure, selfless love the shaman had spoken of. Searched for a woman who could see past the monster to the man still buried underneath. But how could anyone love what he was? How could he ask anyone to tie their short, precious mortal life to his eternity? The answer was simple. He couldn't. So he'd resigned himself to wandering alone until the end of time, doing what little good he could, hoping that somewhere, somehow, it might be enough. Marcus opened his eyes, pulling himself back to the present. The storm was getting worse. Even midnight was struggling now, the snow up to the horse's chest in some places. They needed shelter soon, or the animal wouldn't make it through the night. And then he heard it, a sound so faint that human ears would never have caught it. A heartbeat, weak and irregular, struggling against the cold. Marcus pulled midnight to a stop, his enhanced senses searching through the white chaos around him. There, about 30 yards to the east, someone was out there in the storm, someone who was dying. He didn't hesitate. Marcus urged midnight forward, following that fading heartbeat like a beacon. With each step, the sound grew clearer and weaker. Please, he thought, though he wasn't sure who he was praying to. Not yet. Just hold on a little longer. The shape materialized out of the snow like a ghost taking form. A person collapsed in the drifts, barely visible beneath the white blanket that was slowly burying them. Marcus was off his horse before midnight had fully stopped. He dropped to his knees beside the figure, brushing away snow, with hands that moved almost too fast to see. A woman, young, maybe early 20s. She wore traditional Apache clothing, beautiful beadwork now frozen stiff and crusted with ice. Her skin had taken on the bluish tinge of severe hypothermia. Her lips were pale, her breathing so shallow it was almost non-existent. But she was alive. Barely, but alive. "Miss," Marcus said, shaking her gently. "Miss, can you hear me?" Nothing. No response at all. He pressed his ear close to her mouth, felt the barest whisper of breath against his cheek. In her arms, clutched against her chest, even in unconsciousness, was a leather pouch. Medicine bag he recognized. She'd been on some kind of healing mission when the storm caught her. Marcus didn't waste another second. He stripped off his heavy fur coat, the one that he wore more for appearances than warmth, and wrapped it around the woman's frozen body. Then he lifted her in his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. She was so cold. Even to him, who'd felt no temperature in 3 centuries, she felt like ice. He carried her to midnight, settling her across the saddle before mounting behind her. He pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her to share whatever warmth his body could still provide. It wasn't much. Vampires ran cold, but it was better than nothing. "Hold on," he whispered against her hair. "Just hold on, I'll find shelter. I promise." As if the universe had decided to show him a small mercy, Marcus spotted a dark shape through the snow. A structure of some kind. As they drew closer, he could make out the rough outline of a cabin. It was old, abandoned. The roof had partially caved in on one side, and the door hung crooked on rusted hinges. But the walls were solid, and more importantly, it would block the wind. It was shelter. It was hope. Marcus dismounted with the woman still in his arms and kicked the door open. The interior was dark and thick with dust, but it was dry and significantly warmer than outside. He carried the woman to an old bed frame in the corner, laying her down gently. He needed fire. Now, moving with speed that blurred the edges of his form, Marcus gathered wood from the pile stacked in the corner. Someone had left it here long ago, probably planning to return and never making it back. He arranged it in the stone fireplace, then pulled out the matches he always carried. The fire caught quickly, flames licking up the dry wood and beginning to push back the cold. Marcus returned to the woman, checking her pulse. Still weak, still irregular. But there. He removed his coat from around her, then began the careful work of getting her out of her wet, frozen clothing. He kept his movements clinical, professional, replacing each sodden layer with dry blankets he found in an old chest. This wasn't about anything except saving her life. When she was as dry and warm as he could make her, Marcus sat back and allowed himself to really look at her face. She was beautiful. Not in the manufactured way of the society women he'd known centuries ago, or the ethereal, otherworldly beauty of Elena. This was something earthier, more real. High cheekbones, strong jaw, skin the color of warm bronze, even pale as it was from the cold. Black hair that would probably fall past her shoulders when it wasn't frozen and plastered to her skull. There was strength in her face. Character. The kind of beauty that came from within and radiated outward. Marcus found himself hoping more desperately than he'd hoped for anything in decades that she would survive. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus fed the fire constantly, never letting the flames die down. He monitored her breathing, her heartbeat, every tiny sign that her body was fighting its way back from the edge. And slowly, so slowly, she began to improve. Color crept back into her cheeks. Her breathing steadied. Her heartbeat grew stronger, more regular. Dawn came, gray light filtering through the cracks in the walls. Marcus had positioned himself in a corner where the sunlight wouldn't reach him. Direct sunlight wouldn't kill him, not anymore. That was a myth. But it hurt, burned, weakened him significantly. The woman stirred. Marcus went completely still, watching as her eyelids fluttered, watching as consciousness slowly returned. Her eyes opened. They were the color of dark honey, rich and warm, even clouded with confusion. For a long moment she stared up at the ceiling, not understanding where she was or what had happened. Then her gaze found him. Marcus saw the fear flash across her face, saw her body tense, ready to flee or fight despite her weakened state. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, the universal gesture of peace. Easy, he said softly. You're safe. I found you in the storm last night. You were nearly frozen. I brought you here. She stared at him, those honey-colored eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or threat. Her hand moved to her side, probably looking for a weapon that wasn't there. Who are you? Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, but there was steel underneath the weakness. My name is Marcus Thorne, miss. I'm just a drifter. Was crossing the mountains when I heard you in the storm. He paused. What's your name? She hesitated, clearly weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she said Nalani. Nalani, Marcus repeated. It was a beautiful name. It suited her. How are you feeling? You were in bad shape when I found you. Nalani tried to sit up, gasped, and fell back against the blankets. Marcus was on his feet, instantly moving toward her, but stopped when he saw her flinch away. I won't hurt you, he said quietly. I just want to help. She looked at him again, that searching gaze that seemed to see more than it should. After a moment, some of the tension left her shoulders. I feel like I've been trampled by a buffalo herd, she admitted. How long was I out there? I don't know. I found you maybe 6 hours ago. The storm's still going strong outside. Nalani closed her eyes, and Marcus saw her lips move in what might have been a prayer. When she opened them again, there was determination there. My horse, she said. I was riding back to my village. I had medicine. The elders are sick, they need it. My horse threw me in the storm. I tried to find shelter, but she trailed off the memory, clearly painful. Marcus glanced at the medicine bag he'd placed carefully on the table. Is that it? The leather pouch? Nalani's eyes widened. You saved it. You were holding on to it like your life depended on it. Seemed important. For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched her lips. It is important. It's the only thing that can help them. I went all the way to the other side of the mountain to find the herbs. Your village must mean a great deal to you, Marcus said. To risk your life in a storm like that. They're my people, Nalani said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. Marcus found himself admiring her. This woman who'd risked death to help others. Who'd held on to hope even as she was dying in the snow. There was something pure about that kind of love. Selfless and true. The kind of love he'd been searching for, though not in the way he'd expected. The storm raged for 3 days. Marcus and Nalani were trapped in the cabin together, two strangers forced into an intimacy neither had anticipated. Those 3 days changed everything. At first, Nalani was wary. She watched him with those intelligent eyes, clearly trying to understand him. Marcus didn't blame her for the caution. He was a strange man who'd appeared out of nowhere. She had every right to be suspicious. But Marcus made no threatening moves. He kept his distance, giving her space. He tended the fire, made sure she had water from melted snow, and offered her what little food he had in his saddlebags. "You're not eating," Nalani observed on the second day. Marcus had been expecting this. "Not hungry." "You haven't slept either." "Insomnia." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Not yet. Instead, they talked. At first, the conversations were simple. Safe. Marcus told her about his travels, about the places he'd seen. He spoke of sunrises over deserts and storms over oceans of cities and wildernesses, carefully editing out any details that might reveal how long he'd actually been traveling. Nalani told him about her village, about growing up as the chief's daughter, about her mother who died 3 winters ago from a fever that no medicine could cure, about learning the ways of the shaman, about her gift for sensing the spirits that move through all living things. "My grandmother was the greatest shaman our tribe ever knew," Nalani said, staring into the fire. "She could speak to the ancestors, could see the future in dreams. When she died, everyone expected my mother to take her place. But my mother wasn't interested in the spiritual world. She wanted to be a warrior." "Was she?" Marcus asked. Nalani smiled. "The best. She fought in battles, led hunting parties, was my father's most trusted advisor. She proved that women could be warriors as easily as men, if given the chance." "She sounds remarkable." "She was." Nalani's smile faded. "I miss her every day. After she died, I realized I wanted to follow in my grandmother's footsteps instead. The spiritual path. I wanted to help people the way she did. To heal instead of fight." "That's a noble calling," I know, Marcus said softly. "What about you?" Nalani asked, turning those penetrating eyes on him. "What are you searching for out here, Marcus?" "Thorn, what makes a man wander alone through mountains in winter?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Peace," he finally said. "I'm searching for peace." "Peace from what?" "My past." Nalani nodded as if she understood, and perhaps she did. "The past can be heavy," she said, "like stones we carry in our hearts. Sometimes the weight becomes too much." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "Exactly like that." On the third night, as the storm finally began to show signs of weakening, Nalani asked the question Marcus had been dreading. "There's something different about you," she said. They were sitting on opposite sides of the fire, shadows dancing between them. "I've felt it since I first opened my eyes. You're not like other men." Marcus tensed. "What do you mean?" "You don't eat. You don't sleep. Your eyes change color when the light hits them. When you move quickly, it's almost like you blur at the edges." She leaned forward, the firelight turning her face into plains of gold and shadow. "And there's something else. Something I can feel but not see, like you're carrying a great darkness inside you." Marcus's first instinct was to deny it, to make up some story that would satisfy her curiosity without revealing the truth. But as he looked at her, at the openness in her face, at the lack of fear despite what she was describing, he found he didn't want to lie, not to her. "You're right," he said quietly. "I am different. I am carrying darkness. I have been for a very long time." "How long?" "Longer than you can imagine." Nalani was quiet, absorbing this. Then to his surprise, she smiled. "My grandmother used to say that the darkest nights produce the brightest stars. That carrying darkness doesn't make you dark. It's what you choose to do with it that matters." Something in Marcus's chest, something he'd thought long dead, stirred at those words. "I don't think your grandmother would have said that if she knew the things I've done," he said. "Maybe not," Nalani agreed. "But she also used to say that every soul deserves the chance to seek redemption, that it's never too late to change the path you're on." Marcus looked at her, this young woman who spoke with wisdom beyond her years, and felt something crack inside him, some wall he'd built around his heart to keep the pain at bay. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked. Nalani cocked her head, considering the question. "I told you, I have a gift. I can sense the spirits in all things, the energy that flows through the world." She paused. "When I look at you, I see two spirits at war. One dark and ancient and very powerful. But underneath that, buried deep, is another spirit, smaller, wounded, but still there, still fighting. That's the spirit of a man who wants to be good." Tears stung Marcus's eyes. In 300 years, no one had seen him so clearly. No one had looked past the monster to the man still struggling underneath. "I don't know if I can be good," he whispered. I don't know if it's possible after everything I've done. Then why are you trying? Nalani asked gently. Marcus had no answer for that. Or perhaps he had too many answers and none of them seemed adequate. That night, Marcus barely slept at all. Not that he needed much sleep anyway, but he sat by the fire watching Nalani rest and thought about her words. Every soul deserves the chance to seek redemption. Could it really be that simple? Just before dawn, when the fire had burned low and the storm had finally begun to quiet, Nalani stirred. Marcus looked over to find her awake, watching him with those eyes that saw too much. Tell me, she said softly. Tell me what you really are. And Marcus found himself doing something he'd sworn he'd never do. He found himself trusting someone with the truth. I need to show you something first, he said. A memory. Will you let me? Nalani sat up slowly, wrapped in blankets, and nodded. Marcus closed his eyes and reached for the gift he rarely used anymore. The ability to share memories, to let someone see into his past as clearly as if they'd been there themselves. He extended his hand toward Nalani. She didn't hesitate. She reached out and took it. The cabin disappeared. The fire, the storm, the mountain all faded away. Nalani found herself standing in a beautiful chamber richly furnished in the style of centuries past. A young man sat at a writing desk, the candlelight making his brown hair shine like copper. He was handsome, fresh-faced, couldn't have been more than 25 years old. She recognized those eyes, though. Those eyes were older than the face they occupied. The door opened. A woman entered, breathtakingly beautiful with midnight hair and a smile that promised everything. Nalani watched as the memory played out. Watched the courtship, the seduction, the promises of eternal love. Watched as trust turned to horror on the young man's face when the woman's true nature was revealed. She felt the pain of the bite, the terror of the transformation, the awful realization of what he'd become. And then she saw the years that followed, a blur of darkness and blood and guilt. She saw Marcus struggle with the hunger, saw him give in to it again and again, saw the faces of his victims, each one etched into his memory with perfect, terrible clarity. She saw him become a king, saw him sit on a throne he never wanted, presiding over creatures of the night, trying to maintain some semblance of order in a world of chaos. She saw him meet the old shaman, heard the prophecy of redemption, saw him walk away from everything, choosing exile and wandering over power and certainty. And finally, she saw the last 50 years, Marcus helping strangers, saving lives where he could, teaching himself to survive on animal blood, fighting the hunger every single day, searching desperately for something he was terrified didn't exist, a chance at humanity, a chance at love. The memory released her. Nalani found herself back in the cabin, still holding Marcus's hand, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Marcus said, pulling his hand away. I shouldn't have shown you that. It was too much. No, Nalani said, her voice thick with emotion. No, you needed to show me. I needed to understand. And now that you do, Marcus asked. He couldn't quite meet her eyes. Now that you know what I am, what I've done. Nalani was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd seen. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and sure. You're a vampire, she said, an immortal creature that's walked this earth for 300 years. You've killed, you've caused pain, you've lived in darkness. Marcus nodded, the weight of that truth crushing. But that's not all you are, Nalani continued. You're also a man who hated what he'd become, a man who spent 2.5 centuries trying to do better, even when it seemed impossible. A man who walked away from ultimate power because he knew it was corrupting his soul. A man who spent 50 years trying to earn forgiveness, even though you don't believe you deserve it. She reached out and touched his face gently, forcing him to look at her. You saved my life, Marcus Thorne. You didn't have to. You could have left me to die in that storm and continued on your way. But you didn't. You risked exposure, risked everything to save a stranger. That's not the action of a monster. That's the action of a good man. I'm not good, Marcus said hoarsely. Maybe not yet, Nalani agreed, but you're trying to be. And that counts for more than you know. The storm broke that morning. When they stepped outside the cabin, the world had been transformed. Snow covered everything in a blanket of pristine white, sparkling in the sunlight like a field of diamonds. The sky was a brilliant blue, cloudless and perfect. It was time to continue the journey to Nalani's village. Marcus retrieved Midnight from the small lean-to where the horse had weathered the storm. The animal was tired but healthy, ready to continue. My village is east, Nalani said, pointing toward the twin peaks visible in the distance. We follow the frozen river down into the valley. If we maintain steady pace, we can be there by nightfall. Marcus helped her mount, then climbed up behind her. Nalani settled against his chest, and Marcus tried not to think about how right it felt, how perfectly she fit there. They rode in comfortable silence for the first few hours. The landscape was breathtaking, all snow-covered peaks and frozen waterfalls, ice crystals catching the light and throwing rainbows across their path. Marcus, Nalani said eventually, that prophecy the shaman told you, about true love breaking the curse, do you believe it's possible? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I don't know, he admitted. I want to believe it, but how can I ask anyone to love someone like me? How can I expect anyone to tie their life to an immortal? They'd grow old while I stayed the same. They'd die while I lived on. That's not love, that's torture. Maybe, Nalani said, or maybe you're thinking about it wrong. Maybe the prophecy isn't about someone loving you despite what you are. Maybe it's about you learning to love someone so much that you want them to be free, even free from you. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd never thought about it that way before. Before he could respond, midnight suddenly stopped, ears back, nostrils flaring. Marcus's enhanced senses caught it a second later. The smell of unwashed bodies, gun oil, and ill intent. His eyes scanned the narrow canyon they were riding through, picking out shapes concealed behind rocks. They were surrounded. 6 men emerged from hiding, all armed with rifles and revolvers. They wore dirty clothes and cruel smiles. Bandits, the kind who preyed on travelers in remote areas, taking everything from money to lives. The leader was a stocky man with a scar running down his left cheek. He rode forward on a mangy horse, his rifle pointed casually at Marcus. Well, well, he drawled. What do we have here, a traveler and a pretty little Indian girl? You folks picked the wrong canyon to ride through. This here's Red Scorpion territory, and there's a toll for passage. Marcus felt Nalani tense against him. He kept his voice calm, reasonable. We don't want any trouble, gentlemen. We're just passing through on our way to the Apache village. The leader laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. Apache village. Well then, this is your lucky day, friend. The chief's daughter would fetch a mighty fine ransom. Maybe we'll just take her and let you go on your way. That's not going to happen, Marcus said quietly. One of the other bandits, younger and more nervous than the rest, rode closer to get a better look at Nalani. Hey, boss, I recognize her. That's Chief Addison's daughter, the one they say has a spirit magic or some such. The leader's eyes lit up with greed. Is that so? Well, then she's worth even more than I thought. Hand her over, stranger, and maybe we won't put a bullet in you. Marcus could feel the hunger rising in him, called forth by the threat, by the adrenaline, by the protective fury building in his chest. He pushed it down forcefully. He would not give in to the monster. Not here. Not in front of Nalani. Last chance, Marcus said. Ride away now and nobody gets hurt. The leader sneered. You counting wrong, stranger. There's 6 of us and 1 of you. The only one getting hurt here is... Marcus moved. To human eyes, he was a blur. One moment sitting on the horse, the next standing on the ground, having gently lowered Nalani to safety behind a boulder. The bandits shouted in confusion. The leader fired his rifle, but Marcus was already gone, moving faster than the bullet. He appeared beside the nearest bandit, grabbed the man's revolver from his holster, and crushed it in his bare hand like it was made of clay. The bandit screamed and fell off his horse. Marcus didn't hurt him, didn't even touch him beyond taking the weapon. But the display of strength was enough. He moved to the next man, then the next, disarming them with speed and power that should have been impossible. Within seconds, all 6 bandits were weaponless, their gun crushed to scrap metal or thrown far into the snow. The leader stared at Marcus with wide, terrified eyes. What are you? He whispered. Marcus's eyes, he knew, had probably shifted color in the heat of the moment, showing flecks of red that marked his true nature. He took a step toward the leader, and his voice came out cold and ancient. I'm someone you don't want to anger. Leave now. And if I ever hear of you threatening travelers in these mountains again, I'll find you. And next time, I won't be merciful. The bandits didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled onto their horses and fled down the canyon, their panicked shouts echoing off the rocks. Silence fell. Marcus stood still for a moment, getting himself under control. The hunger was screaming at him, demanding he chase them down, demanding blood. He forced it into submission through sheer force of will. When he finally turned around, he found Nalani standing by the boulder, watching him with an unreadable expression. I'm sorry you had to see that, Marcus said quietly. To his surprise, Nalani stepped forward and took his hand. Don't apologize. You protected me. You could have killed them easily, couldn't you? But you didn't. You just scared them away. The old me would have killed them all, Marcus admitted. Wouldn't have even thought twice about it. But you're not the old you anymore, Nalani said. You're the man trying to be better. And you succeeded. You saved me again without becoming the monster. They stood there in the snow-covered canyon, hands clasped, and Marcus felt something shift between them. Something deeper than gratitude or friendship. Something that scared him more than any battle ever had. They continued their journey as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The landscape opened up into a wide valley, and in the distance, Marcus could see smoke rising from cooking fires. The Apache village. As they drew closer, Nalani sat up straighter, and Marcus could feel the tension in her body. She was coming home, but she was bringing a stranger with her. An outsider. And not just any outsider, but one who carried secrets that could put her entire tribe at risk. Nalani, Marcus said softly, when we get to your village, I'll tell your father I found you in the storm and helped you home. Then I'll leave. It's better that way. No, Nalani said firmly. You can't tell them what I am. I won't tell them, Nalani interrupted. But you're not leaving immediately either. My father will want to thank you. The tribe will want to celebrate my return. You saved the chief's daughter. You're a hero. They'll treat you as an honored guest. I'm not a hero, Marcus said. You are to me. Before Marcus could argue further, riders appeared in the distance. Apache warriors, about a dozen of them, racing toward them at full gallop. It's the search party, Nalani said. They've been looking for me. The warriors surrounded them within minutes, their faces showing relief at seeing Nalani alive and well. But their expressions hardened when they looked at Marcus, suspicion clear in their eyes. One warrior in particular, younger than the others, with a fierce gaze and a scar on his left cheek, rode forward on a painted horse. Nalani, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Thank the spirits you're alive. Your father has had parties searching for 3 days. We thought... He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I'm fine, Maka, Nalani said gently. I got caught in the storm, but Marcus found me. He saved my life. Maka's dark eyes fixed on Marcus with clear hostility. Who are you, stranger? What were you doing in the mountains during that storm? Just passing through, Marcus said calmly. I happened to find Nalani nearly frozen. Took her to an old cabin until the storm passed, then brought her home. How convenient, Maka said, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. A mysterious stranger appears just in time to play hero. Maka, enough, Nalani said sharply. Marcus is telling the truth. He risked his own life to save mine. You will treat him with respect. The other warriors exchanged glances. It was clear that Nalani held authority among them, even the older, more experienced men. Her position as the chief's daughter and a shaman in training gave her power they couldn't ignore. Maka's jaw tightened, but he backed down. Chief Addison will want to see you immediately. Both of you. They rode into the village as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. People poured out of their lodges, voices rising in celebration as they saw Nalani alive and well. Children ran alongside the horses, laughing and shouting. Women ululated in joy. Men clasped hands and embraced. It was a scene of pure happiness, and Marcus felt like an intruder in it. The crowd parted to make way for a tall, imposing man who walked with the bearing of someone born to lead. Chief Addison was in his mid-50s, his black hair streaked with gray, his face lined with both wisdom and worry. When he saw Nalani, the worry melted away, replaced by profound relief. My daughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Nalani slid off the horse and ran into her father's arms. The chief held her tightly, and Marcus could see his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. After a long moment, Addison released his daughter and turned his attention to Marcus, who had dismounted and stood at a respectful distance. The chief's eyes were penetrating, seeming to look straight through flesh and bone to whatever lay beneath. Marcus met that gaze steadily, refusing to look away, even though every instinct screamed at him that this man knew. This man saw. You brought my daughter home, Addison said. It wasn't a question. I found her in the storm, Chief Addison. Any decent man would have done the same. Perhaps, the chief said, but it was you who did it. You have my gratitude, stranger. What is your name? Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne, Addison repeated, as if tasting the name. Tonight you will sleep in our village as an honored guest. Tomorrow we will speak more. But for now, let us celebrate the return of my daughter. The feast that night was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in decades. The entire tribe gathered around a great fire, sharing food and stories. There was music, laughter, and dancing. Children played. Elders told tales. It was community in its purest form. Marcus sat at a place of honor near the chief's fire, though he ate nothing. When people asked, he claimed he'd filled up earlier and was still satisfied. No one questioned it too closely, too caught up in the joy of celebration. Across the fire, he watched Nalani. She was in her element here, surrounded by her people, smiling and laughing. She caught his eye more than once, and each time the smile she gave him made something warm bloom in his chest. Something dangerous. Something that felt an awful lot like hope. Makas sat nearby, his eyes constantly moving between Nalani and Marcus. Suspicion and jealousy written clearly on his face. It didn't take supernatural perception to understand that the young warrior had feelings for the chief's daughter. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Chief Addison rose and addressed his people. "My friends, my family," he said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "We give thanks tonight for the safe return of Nalani. We give thanks to Marcus Thorne, who found her when she needed help most. Let his actions remind us that goodness can be found in unexpected places, that strangers can become friends, and that the spirits watch over those who travel with pure hearts." The tribe cheered, and Marcus felt dozens of eyes on him. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, uncomfortable with the attention. Later, as the fire burned low and people began to retire to their lodges, Nalani approached Marcus where he sat alone on the edge of the gathering. "You should get some rest," she said softly. "You've earned it." "I don't really sleep much," Marcus admitted. "I know." She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "My father wants to speak with you tomorrow, privately." "I expected as much." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the embers of the fire drift into the night sky like tiny stars. "Nalani," Marcus said finally, "what we talked about in the cabin, about what I am, about the curse, you can't tell anyone. Not your father, not the shaman, no one. It's too dangerous." "I won't tell them you're a vampire," Nalani promised. "But my father is wise. He sees more than most people. He may already suspect something." Marcus nodded slowly. That had been his fear. "What will you do after tomorrow?" Nalani asked. "After you speak with my father." "Leave," Marcus said simply. "Continue wandering. It's what I do." "What if you didn't have to?" Nalani said quietly. "What if you could stay?" Marcus turned to look at her and found her honey-colored eyes already on him, full of an emotion he didn't dare name. "I can't stay, Nalani. You know why. Because you're immortal and I'm not. Because I care about you too much to tie you to a cursed existence." The words were out before Marcus could stop them. Nalani's breath caught. "You care about me," she said, not quite a question. "More than I should," Marcus admitted. "More than is wise. Which is exactly why I have to leave." Nalani reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "What if I don't want you to leave?" "Nalani, I'm not a child, Marcus. I know my own mind. And I know that in 3 days I've felt more understood, more seen, more valued by you than I have by anyone in years. What we have, whatever this is between us, it's real. I can feel it. It doesn't matter what we feel," Marcus said, though saying the words hurt more than any physical wound. "I'm a vampire. You're human. You'll age, you'll die, and I'll go on. I can't watch that happen. I can't." "Then maybe you won't have to," Nalani said. "The prophecy, true love freely given, maybe that's what this is. Maybe that's why we found each other." Marcus wanted to believe her, wanted it so desperately it was like hunger, like need, like prayer. But he'd lived too long, hoped too many times, only to be disappointed. "Get some rest," he said gently, pulling his hand away. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Nalani looked at him for a long moment, hurt and understanding warring in her expression. Finally, she nodded and stood. "Good night, Marcus Thorne," she said softly. "Dream well." "I don't dream anymore," Marcus said. "Then maybe it's time you started again." She walked away, leaving Marcus alone with the dying fire and the weight of 300 years of loneliness pressing down on his shoulders. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, that weight felt just a little bit lighter. Somewhere in the darkness, hope flickered, small and fragile, but there. And Marcus found himself terrified that come tomorrow, he'd have to extinguish it forever. Dawn came softly to the Apache village, painting the lodges in shades of rose gold and amber. Marcus stood at the edge of the encampment, watching the sun rise over the twin peaks in the distance. He'd spent the night here at this spot far enough from the sleeping tribe that the steady rhythm of their heartbeats wouldn't drive him mad with hunger. It had been harder than he'd expected. So many people, so much life pulsing through the village. The scent of blood, warm and alive, had called to him with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. But he'd held firm, focusing on the meditation techniques he'd learned over decades of self-control. He'd thought about leaving, about saddling midnight in the darkness and riding away before anyone woke. It would be easier that way. Cleaner. No awkward goodbyes, no painful conversations. No looking into Nalani's eyes and seeing the hurt when he told her he couldn't stay. But he owed Chief Addison the courtesy of a proper farewell. The man had welcomed him, fed him, honored him before his entire tribe. Walking away without a word would be an insult Marcus couldn't bring himself to deliver. So he stayed, and he watched the sunrise. And he tried not to think about the woman who'd somehow wormed her way into his carefully guarded heart in just 3 days. You did not sleep. Marcus turned to find Chief Addison standing a few feet away. The older man moved with a silence that would have impressed even vampire senses. He wore simple buckskin clothing, his gray-streaked hair loose around his shoulders, his face calm and unreadable. I don't require much sleep, Marcus said carefully. The chief nodded as if this confirmed something he already knew. He moved to stand beside Marcus, both men watching the village slowly come to life. Smoke began to rise from morning fires. Children's laughter echoed between the lodges. Somewhere a woman sang a morning song in the Apache language, her voice clear and sweet. It is a beautiful sight, Addison said. My people, my family. I have been chief for 30 years, and every morning I wake grateful for the responsibility of leading them. You lead them well, Marcus observed. I've traveled through many territories. Not all tribes are as united as yours. Unity comes from trust, the chief has said, and trust must be earned every single day. A leader who takes trust for granted is a leader who will soon find himself alone. Marcus sensed there was a deeper meaning behind those words, but he remained silent. Walk with me, Marcus Thorne, Addison said. It wasn't a request. They moved away from the village following a narrow path that led up a small rise. At the top stood a single lodge larger than the others and decorated with symbols Marcus recognized as sacred. The chief's private lodge, the place where important decisions were made. Inside, the space was warm and filled with the scent of sage. A small fire burned in the center, smoke rising through the opening at the top. Chief Addison gestured for Marcus to sit on one side of the fire. He took his place on the other. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Marcus had learned centuries ago that silence could be more powerful than words. He waited, letting the chief take his time. Finally, Addison reached beside him and lifted something into the light. A leather pouch, heavy and bulging. He set it on the blanket between them with a soft thud. Gold, the chief said simply. Enough to buy a man his freedom anywhere in this land. Enough to live comfortably for many years without working. Enough to start a new life far from here. Marcus looked at the pouch but made no move to touch it. You saved my daughter's life, Addison continued. Not once, but twice. First from the storm, then from those bandits. A debt like that cannot go unpaid. It would dishonor both you and my people. I don't want payment for doing what was right, Marcus said quietly. I know, the chief said, and there was something like approval in his voice. But customs must be honored, so I offer you this gold. Take it. Use it to build the life you've been searching for these past 3 years. Marcus frowned. How did you know that I've been searching for 3 years? Addison smiled faintly. You have the look of a man who left everything behind. The way you hold yourself, the sadness in your eyes, the careful distance you maintain from others. These are not the signs of a drifter who's always wandered. These are the signs of someone who made a choice to walk away. The old chief was perceptive, dangerously so. There is another option, Addison said, his voice dropping lower. If the gold does not appeal to you. He paused, letting the weight of what he was about to say settle in the air between them. You could have my daughter's hand in marriage. The words hung in the smoke-filled space like a physical presence. Marcus felt his chest tighten, felt the old hunger stir not for blood, but for something far more dangerous, hope. Nalani cares for you, the chief continued. I saw it last night in the way she looked at you, in the way she spoke your name. My daughter has had many suitors over the years, brave warriors, sons of other chiefs, men of wealth and status. She has turned them all away. But you, Marcus Thorne, she looks at differently. Chief Addison, Marcus began, but the older man held up a hand. I am not blind to what exists between you, and I am not so bound by tradition that I cannot see value in an outsider. You saved my daughter. You protected her with your life. You brought her home safely. These actions speak louder than bloodlines or tribal connections. The chief leaned forward, the firelight casting shadows across his weathered face. So I offer you a choice, Marcus Thorne. The gold which will buy you freedom and comfort, or my daughter's hand which will give you family and belonging. Choose. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat slow and steady, could hear the crackle of the fire, could hear faintly the sounds of the village beyond the lodge walls. He thought of Nalani, her strength, her wisdom, her capacity for compassion, even when faced with the truth of what he was. He thought of her honey-colored eyes, the way she smiled, the gentleness of her touch. He thought of the prophecy, true love freely given, a chance to break the curse. And then he thought of what loving him would cost her, watching him remain unchanged while she aged, bearing children who might inherit his curse, living with the knowledge that her husband was a creature of darkness, fighting his nature every single day. He thought of the loneliness that would come when she died, and he lived on, century after century carrying her memory, never able to join her. No, he couldn't do that to her. He couldn't be that selfish. Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate and respectful. He looked Chief Addison directly in the eyes. With the deepest respect, great chief, I must refuse both offers. Addison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Interest, curiosity. Explain yourself. Marcus took a breath he didn't need, centering himself. I didn't save your daughter expecting any reward. I saved her because she was a person in desperate need, and I had the ability to help, that's all. No debt was incurred, no payment is owed. And my daughter, the chief asked softly, your daughter is the most extraordinary woman I have met in, Marcus paused, catching himself before he said, centuries. In all my travels, she's brave, compassionate, wise beyond her years. Any man would be honored to have her as his wife. But not you. Not because she isn't worthy, Marcus said quickly. She's more than worthy. It's because I'm not. He stepped closer to the fire, and in its light let his eyes show what they truly were. Let the red flecks appear, the inhuman gleam that marked him as something other. I'm cursed, Chief Addison. I've lived far longer than any man should live. I've done things that haunt me every moment of every day. I carry darkness inside me that will never fully disappear. And most importantly, Marcus's voice grew rough with emotion he couldn't fully suppress. I will not age. I will not change. 50 years from now, I'll look exactly as I do today. But Nalani won't. She'll grow older. Her beauty will fade. Her strength will diminish. And eventually she'll die. And I'll go on, forever, alone. He met the chief's eyes again. How could I ask her to accept that? How could I tie her beautiful mortal life to my cursed immortal one? She deserves better. She deserves a man who will grow old with her, who will build a life and a family without the shadow of darkness hanging over everything. She deserves to be free to make that choice without the weight of obligation or debt influencing her. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. Her heart doesn't belong to you to give away, Chief. It belongs to her. Only she can decide what to do with it, and I will not be the one to trap her with guilt or duty or gratitude. If she chooses me, it must be freely given with full knowledge of what that choice means. Not because I saved her life, not because you decreed it, but because she wants it. He stepped back from the fire. So I refuse the gold because I need no payment. And I refuse your daughter's hand because she's not a prize to be won or a reward to be claimed. She's a free woman with her own dreams and desires, and those are hers alone to decide. The silence that followed felt eternal. Marcus waited for anger, for offense, for banishment. He'd essentially rejected a tremendous honor and insulted the chief's authority in one speech. But Chief Addison didn't look angry. Instead, slowly a smile spread across his face. It transformed him, taking years off his weathered features, making him look almost young. Finally, he said softly. Finally, a man who understands. Marcus blinked, confused. The chief stood, and there was something like awe in his movements. I have given this same test to 12 men over the past 5 years. 12 warriors, traders, and suitors who came seeking Nalani's hand. All of them, without exception, took one of the 2 offers immediately. He moved around the fire, standing before Marcus. Some took the gold and left without a second thought. Others, the more ambitious ones, asked for my daughter's hand, seeing political advantage, or the prestige of marrying a chief's daughter. Not one of them understood what I was really asking. What were you asking? Marcus said quietly. I was asking them to prove they saw my daughter as a person, not a possession. I was asking them to show that they understood love isn't something that can be given or taken or traded. It must be freely chosen by both people. Addison placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, the gesture almost fatherly. You are the first man to refuse both. The first to understand that Nalani's freedom is more valuable than gold or status, or even love itself. That Marcus Thorne is the mark of someone who might actually deserve her. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Chief Addison, you don't understand. I can't. I know what you are, the chief said simply. The words stopped Marcus cold. What? I know you're a vampire, Addison said calmly as if discussing the weather. I have known since the moment I first laid eyes on you. Marcus tensed, ready to run or fight or do whatever was necessary to protect himself. But the chief's hand on his shoulder remained gentle, unthreatening. How can Marcus managed? 60 years ago, when I was a young man, I traveled far beyond our traditional lands. I met another of your kind, an old vampire, ancient and powerful. He was dying or as close to dying as your kind can come. He'd grown tired of immortality, weary of the endless centuries. Addison's eyes grew distant with memory. He taught me to recognize the signs. The way vampires move, the way their eyes change the spiritual energy they carry. To most people, it would feel like darkness, but I learned to look deeper. Beneath the darkness, some vampires still carry a spark of humanity. You carry one, Marcus. Small, but burning bright. Why didn't you say anything? Marcus asked. Why welcome me into your village when you knew what I was? Because I also saw that you were fighting your nature, the chief said. I saw the control you exercised, the care you took with my daughter, the way you defeated those bandits without killing them when it would have been easy for a creature of your power to simply slaughter them all. He returned to his seat, gesturing for Marcus to do the same. That old vampire I met all those years ago, he told me something before he finally found the peace of death. He said that vampires aren't born monsters. They're made. And sometimes, rarely, they can be unmade. Marcus sat slowly, his mind reeling. The prophecy. The shaman who spoke to me 50 years ago. He was Apache. My father's brother, Addison confirmed. He had the gift of true sight. He could see possible futures paths that might be walked if the right choices were made. He saw you, Marcus. He saw a vampire king who would give up everything seeking redemption. And he saw that you might find it. But the curse, Marcus began, can be broken, the chief finished. But not easily, not simply. The love required to break such a curse must be pure, selfless. Both people must love each other so completely that they want nothing except the other's happiness. They must be willing to sacrifice everything, even their own desires, for the beloved's freedom. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. You just proved you're capable of that love, Marcus. You refused my daughter even though you want her. You chose her freedom over your happiness. That's the first requirement. And the second, Marcus asked, though he thought he already knew. She must choose you, not because of debt or obligation or gratitude, not because I command it or the tribe expects it. She must choose you freely, knowing exactly what she's choosing, understanding the cost. Marcus shook his head. I can't ask her to make that choice. You don't have to ask, Addison said. The choice is already hers. It always was. The question is whether you're brave enough to let her make it. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion outside the lodge drew their attention. Raised voices, one of them clearly upset. Addison sighed. That would be Maka. The young warrior, Marcus said, who has loved my daughter since they were children, the chief confirmed, who expected to marry her someday, and who now sees that future slipping away. The lodge's entrance flap was pushed aside and Maka stormed in. His face was flushed with anger, his dark eyes blazing. Behind him, looking mortified, was Nalani. Father, Maka said, barely controlling his voice. This man cannot be trusted. He's not what he appears to be. Maka, stop, Nalani said, but the young warrior ignored her. He's different, not human. The signs are all there for anyone willing to see them. That's enough, Maka, Chief Addison said, his voice carrying unmistakable authority. But Maka was beyond listening. He turned to Marcus, hand on his knife. What are you? What manner of creature hides among us? Marcus stood slowly, careful to make no threatening moves. I'm not hiding, Maka. Your chief knows what I am. Then tell everyone, Maka challenged. If you're so honest, tell the whole tribe what you are. Marcus looked at Nalani, then at the chief, who gave a slight nod. I'm a vampire, Marcus said simply. I have been for 300 years. I've done terrible things in that time. But I haven't hurt a human being in 50 years. I saved Nalani not because of what I am, but despite it. And now that you know the truth, I'll leave. I never intended to stay anyway. You'll leave when I say you can leave, Maka snarled. You've dishonored this tribe by your presence. You've stolen something that wasn't yours to take. Maka, I chose my own heart, Nalani said firmly. It was never yours. I'm sorry if you thought otherwise, but I've never promised you anything. Because of him, Maka shouted, pointing at Marcus. He's bewitched you somehow. I've used no powers, Marcus interrupted quietly. I couldn't even if I wanted to. Liar, Maka drew his knife. Prove you're not a threat. Maka put down the knife, Chief Addison commanded. But Maka had gone past reason. Years of pent-up frustration, jealousy, and hurt were pouring out all at once. He lunged at Marcus, blade flashing. Marcus didn't move. He could have. Could have disarmed the young warrior in a heartbeat, could have dodged the strike so fast Mackay wouldn't even see him move. Instead, he simply stood still. The knife pierced his shoulder, driving deep. Marcus grunted at the impact but didn't cry out, didn't fight back, didn't retaliate. Marcus! Nalani screamed. Marcus stared at the knife buried in Marcus's shoulder at the blood seeping around the blade. And then, horrified, he saw the wound begin to close. Saw the flesh knit back together around the blade, pushing it out as if the body itself was rejecting the foreign object. The knife clattered to the ground. Marcus stumbled backward. What are you? He whispered. I'm exactly what I said I am, Marcus replied. But I'm not your enemy, Maka. I never was. The crowd outside the lodge had grown. People were frightened, confused. Marcus could smell it on them, could sense the shift in the air from hospitality to hostility. It was time to go. Chief Addison, Marcus said formally, thank you for your hospitality. I'll leave now and trouble your people no further. He started toward the entrance, but Nalani blocked his path. No, she said firmly. Nalani, please. I said no. She turned to face the crowd, to face her father, to face all of them. Marcus saved my life. Twice. He's been nothing but honorable and kind. Yes, he's a vampire. Yes, he's different from us. But he's proven himself to be more trustworthy than many humans I've known. He's a monster, someone in the crowd called out. He's a person who's trying to be better, Nalani shot back. Who spent 50 years atoning for his past. Who gave up power and position to search for redemption. How many of us would have that kind of courage? My daughter is right, Chief Addison said, standing. His voice carried authority that silenced the murmurs. Marcus Thorne has proven himself. He could have killed Maka just now. Could have killed all of us at any point. But he hasn't. He's shown restraint and honor. The chief stepped forward, placing himself beside Marcus. Marcus will stay as my guest until tomorrow. Then if he wishes to leave, he may do so with provisions and my blessing. But he will not be driven out like a criminal. Is this understood? Slowly, reluctantly, people nodded. The crowd began to disperse, though Marcus could feel their eyes on him, wary and uncertain. Maka stood frozen, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Finally, he looked at Nalani. I loved you, he said quietly, since we were children. I know, Nalani said gently, and you will always be dear to me, Maka, like a brother, but that's all I can offer. Maka's jaw tightened. He gave Marcus one last look filled with pain and anger and reluctant respect, then strode out of the lodge. When they were alone again, the three of them, Nalani turned to Marcus. There were tears on her cheeks, but her voice was steady. Why didn't you defend yourself? He could have killed you. I heal, Marcus said simply. He needed to see that I wouldn't fight back, that I wasn't a threat. You could have left, Chief Addison observed. Could have run before anyone knew the truth. I could have, Marcus agreed. But I'm tired of running. And more importantly, I won't have lies between us. Any of us. Nalani stepped closer, so close Marcus could feel the warmth radiating from her living body, could hear her heart beating strong and steady. My father told you about the prophecy, she said. It wasn't a question. He did. And you still plan to leave tomorrow. Marcus looked at her, drinking in every detail. The curve of her cheek, the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in the set of her shoulders. I have to, he said through the words toward him. Nalani, even if the prophecy is real, even if there's a chance the curse could break, I can't ask you to gamble your life on a maybe. You deserve certainty. You deserve a man who can grow old with you, have children with you, die with you. Don't I get a say in what I deserve? Nalani asked softly. Of course you do. That's exactly the point. You get to choose. And that choice can't be influenced by what you think you owe me or what your father might want or anything except what you truly want in your heart. He reached out, almost touched her face, but stopped himself at the last moment. If you choose me, Nalani, you're choosing a hard road. Years of watching me struggle with my nature. The possibility that the curse won't break and you'll be tied to an immortal while your body ages and fails. The knowledge that I've killed people, that I carry centuries of blood on my hands. And if the curse does break, she asked, then I become mortal again. I age, I die. But even then, I'll only have maybe 40 or 50 years left. Not the full lifetime you should have with someone. Nalani smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. You're so focused on what you can't give me that you're missing what you can. You see me, Marcus. You see all of me. Not just the chief's daughter, not just the future shaman, but me. The woman who dreams and doubts and hopes. You've shown me more respect and understanding in 3 days than most men have shown me in a lifetime. She did touch his face, then her palm warm against his cold skin. I'm not afraid of a hard road. I'm afraid of an empty one. A road without love, without purpose, without meaning. I'd rather have 1 year of real connection than a lifetime of comfortable loneliness. Nalani, Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. I'm not asking for your answer now, she said. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just asking you to let me make my own choice. Don't run away to protect me. Trust me to know my own mind. Chief Addison, who had been silent during this exchange, spoke up. Stay 1 more day, Marcus. Give my daughter the respect of time to decide. Give yourself the same gift. Whatever choice is made, let it be made with clear minds and open hearts. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to insist that leaving now was the right thing, the noble thing. But looking at Nalani, seeing the plea in her eyes, he found he couldn't say no. 1 more day, he agreed quietly. That afternoon, Marcus walked alone through the forest beyond the village. He needed space, needed to think, needed to wrestle with the impossible choice before him. Stay and risk hurting Nalani if the prophecy failed. Leave and hurt her for certain right now. There was no good answer. He found himself by a small stream, its water running clear and cold over smooth stones. The sound was peaceful, almost meditative. Marcus sat on the bank watching the play of light on water, trying to center himself. The old stories say vampires can't cross running water. Marcus turned to find an elderly woman standing a few feet away. She was tiny, bent with age, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. That's a myth, Marcus said carefully, like the one about garlic. The old woman chuckled and moved to sit beside him with surprising agility. I'm Kimmy. I was the shaman before Nalani's grandmother. Now I'm just an old woman who watches and remembers. It's an honor to meet you, grandmother. No need for formalities with me, vampire. I know what you are. I've known since you arrived. Marcus wasn't surprised anymore. Seems like I'm not very good at hiding it. You're not trying to hide, Kimmy observed. If you were truly trying, we wouldn't sense anything amiss. No, you're simply being yourself, and yourself happens to be honest. It's refreshing. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kimmy spoke again. I knew the shaman who gave you the prophecy. He was my student once, long ago. A good man with a powerful gift. He saw something in me I'm not sure exists, Marcus said. He saw potential, Kimmy corrected. He saw a vampire king so disgusted with what he'd become that he walked away from everything. He saw a creature of darkness searching desperately for light, and he saw that sometimes, just sometimes, even the most impossible transformations can occur. But at what cost? Marcus asked. If Nalani chooses me and the prophecy fails, she'll spend her life tied to a monster. Kimmy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, let me tell you a story. 60 years ago, I fell in love with a man from another tribe, a tribe our people had been at war with for generations. My family forbade it. His family forbade it. Everyone said it was impossible, that we'd only bring suffering to each other. She smiled at the memory. We married anyway. And yes, it was hard. There was anger, rejection, pain. But there was also love. Deep, true, transformative love. We had 40 years together before he died. 40 years that changed both our tribes, that helped heal old wounds, that proved love could bridge even the widest divides. Kimmy turned to look at Marcus directly. Was it worth it? The hardship, the struggle, the years of being outcasts before we were finally accepted every single day? Because love isn't about easy paths and guaranteed outcomes. Love is about choosing someone and fighting for that choice no matter what comes. But I'm not human, Marcus said. I'm a vampire. That's not the same as coming from a different tribe. No, Kimmy agreed. It's harder, much harder. But the principle remains. If you love Nalani, if she loves you, then together you face whatever comes. Maybe the curse breaks. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you have 50 years together. Maybe you have 5. But they'll be real years, lived fully, without regret. She stood slowly, using a walking stick Marcus hadn't noticed before. The question isn't whether the path is hard, vampire. The question is whether you're brave enough to walk it. She left him there by the stream, her words echoing in his mind. That evening, the tribe gathered again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Wary, but not hostile. Curious, but not fearful. Marcus sat at the edge of the gathering, not quite part of it, but no longer completely excluded. Nalani sat with her father near the central fire, but her eyes kept finding Marcus across the flames. Each time their gazes met, something passed between them. Something unspoken but profound. Mako was noticeably absent. As the night deepened, people began to tell stories. Tales of the tribe's history of great hunts and terrible battles of loves won and lost. It was a tradition Marcus understood, a way of remembering who they were, where they came from. And then surprisingly, Chief Addison stood and gestured to Marcus. "Come, sit beside me." Marcus hesitated, but the chief's expression was insistent. He made his way around the fire and sat in the place of honor at the chief's right hand. "My people," Addison said, his voice carrying easily. "Tonight I want to tell you a true story about sacrifice and redemption." He looked at Marcus, his eyes asking permission. Marcus nodded slightly. 300 years ago, a young man had everything. A good life, a promising future love in his heart. And then it was all stolen from him. He was turned into a monster, against his will abandoned, to figure out his cursed existence alone. The crowd had gone silent listening. For centuries he struggled. He did terrible things, became a king of monsters ruling over darkness. But inside, the man he'd once been never quite died. That small spark of humanity survived, waiting for a chance to grow again. Addison's voice grew stronger. 50 years ago, that vampire king did something almost unheard of. He walked away, gave up power, safety, everything he'd built. He chose to wander alone, fighting his nature every day, helping people where he could, searching for a way to become human again. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's him, the outsider." "Yes," the chief had confirmed. "Marcus Thorne. He's walked this path of redemption for 50 years. Never harming humans, surviving on animal blood, doing good wherever possible. And 3 days ago, he saved my daughter's life. Not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do." Addison looked around at his people. "I have seen into his heart. I know his struggle. And I tell you now, this vampire has more honor than many humans I've known. He's proven himself worthy of our respect, if not yet our complete trust. He will leave tomorrow if he chooses, but he leaves with my blessing and my gratitude." The silence that followed was profound. Then slowly an old warrior stood. "I have fought many enemies in my life," the warrior said. "Men who claimed to be good but were rotten inside. If what the chief says is true, if this vampire has truly walked the path of redemption for 50 years, then he has more courage than most of us. I honor that courage." Another person stood, then another. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to show that Marcus was being accepted, at least partially, into the community. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. He felt seen, truly seen. Not as a monster, not as a king, but as someone trying to be better. When the gathering ended and people retired to their lodges, Nalani approached Marcus where he stood at the edge of the firelight. "Walk with me," she asked. They left the village, following a path that led to a small hill overlooking the valley. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for defending me, for believing in me." "I'm not sure it's belief," Nalani said. "I think it's just seeing what's really there." They stood side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence. "Tomorrow," Marcus said, "I'm supposed to make a choice, stay or go. And what will you choose?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What would you do if you could be human again, if this curse broke and you had maybe 40 or 50 mortal years left? What would you want?" Nalani considered the question carefully. "I'd want a simple life, a small lodge somewhere beautiful, a family, purpose in helping others, love, real deep transformative love." "That sounds perfect," Marcus whispered. "It does, doesn't it?" Nalani turned to face him fully. "And that's what I want, Marcus, with you. Whether you stay a vampire or become human, whether we have 50 years or 5, I want to walk that path with you." "Nalani, let me finish," she said firmly. "You keep trying to protect me from hardship. But don't you see, the hardship I fear isn't being with a vampire. It's living without love. It's spending my life playing it safe, choosing the easy path, and always wondering what could have been." She took his hand, her skin warm against his cold palm. "I'm choosing you, Marcus, freely, with full knowledge of what that means. I'm choosing you because you see me, because you respect me, Because you make me feel more alive than I've ever felt. And yes, because I love you." The words hung in the night air between them, stars bearing witness. "I love you too." Marcus said, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I've loved you since that first morning in the cabin when you looked at me without fear. Since every conversation we've had, every moment we've shared. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Then stop running from it," Nalani said softly. "Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. Trust me. Trust this." Marcus looked at her, this extraordinary woman who'd somehow seen past 3 centuries of darkness to the man still buried underneath. This woman who offered him not just love, but hope. And for the first time in 50 years, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. "I'll stay," he said quietly. "One more day, one more week, however long you'll have me." Nalani smiled, radiant and beautiful in the starlight. "How about forever?" "Forever is a long time for a vampire," Marcus said. "Then I guess we'd better make the most of it." She leaned forward and Marcus met her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that felt like coming home after centuries of wandering. Felt like the first light of dawn after the longest night. Felt like redemption. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus realized something had changed. The constant hunger that had gnawed at him for 300 years had quieted. Not gone, but subdued. As if by choosing love, by opening his heart, he'd found a different kind of sustenance. "We should go back," Nalani said, though she made no move to leave his arms. "Soon," Marcus agreed. They stood there on the hill under the stars, two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds, holding on to hope that love might be enough to break even the darkest curse. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, questions to answer, traditions to navigate, and a prophecy that might or might not come true. But tonight they had this moment, this choice, this love. And for now, that was enough. Dawn came too quickly. Marcus had spent the night sitting outside the village, once again watching stars wheel overhead, thinking about the choice he'd made, the choice to stay, the choice to hope. It terrified him more than any battle he'd fought in 3 centuries. Inside the village, preparations were already underway for the morning council. Marcus could hear the low murmur of voices, the movement of people gathering. Chief Addison had called for a formal meeting to address what everyone now knew: a vampire walked among them, and the chief's daughter had chosen him. Marcus stood and brushed snow from his coat. Time to face whatever came next. When he entered the village, people stopped and stared. Some with curiosity, some with lingering fear, some with expressions he couldn't quite read. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' skirts, eyes wide, with the kind of fascinated terror reserved for creatures from stories. Marcus kept his head high, his movements careful and unthreatening. He'd learned long ago that body language spoke louder than words. The council lodge was already full when he arrived. Elders sat in a semicircle, their weathered faces impassive. Warriors stood along the walls, hands resting on weapons, but not drawing them. And at the center, Chief Addison sat with Nalani at his right side. She met Marcus's eyes as he entered, and the small smile she gave him felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Marcus Thorne," Chief Addison began formally, "you have asked to remain among us. You have declared your intentions toward my daughter. The council has gathered to hear testimony and render judgment on whether this union can be blessed." Marcus inclined his head respectfully. "I understand, great chief." "Before we begin," Addison continued, "my daughter has asked permission to speak. I grant it." Nalani stood, and every eye in the lodge turned to her. She wore traditional ceremonial clothing, her hair braided with beads and feathers, marks of her status as both the chief's daughter and a shaman in training. She looked regal and powerful and utterly beautiful. "My people," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I know there is fear. I know what Marcus's challenges everything we thought we knew about the world. But I ask you to look beyond the surface. Look at his actions." She moved to the center of the circle, commanding attention effortlessly. "When he found me dying in the snow, he could have left me, could have taken my blood when I was too weak to resist. Instead, he saved me, protected me, brought me home safely. When bandits threatened us, he defeated them without killing, showing mercy even to those who deserved none." Her eyes swept the assembled crowd. "And yesterday, when Maka attacked him, Marcus didn't fight back, didn't use his power to hurt someone weaker than himself. He took the blade and stood still, proving he was no threat to us." One of the elders, a woman with white hair and sharp eyes, spoke up. "But he is still a vampire child. His nature is to hunt, to kill, to feed on the living. Can we trust that he won't give in to that nature?" "He hasn't for 50 years, Nalani countered. 50 years of fighting his own darkness, choosing a harder path every single day. That's not weakness. That's strength beyond what most of us can imagine. Another elder, a man with scars crossing his face, leaned forward. And what of children? If you marry this creature, what will your offspring be? Will they carry his curse? Marcus saw Nalani falter for the first time. It was a question neither of them had fully considered. I don't know, she admitted honestly, but I trust that whatever comes, we'll face it together. And isn't that what marriage is, facing the unknown with someone you trust? The scarred elder grunted, neither approving nor disapproving. Maka's voice cut through the discussion, hard and angry. This is madness. You're asking us to accept a monster into our midst, to celebrate a union that goes against nature itself. He stepped forward from where he'd been standing against the wall, his face tight with barely controlled emotion. I challenge this, Maka declared, his voice ringing out. By the old law, I invoke the right of trial by combat for Nalani's hand. A murmur rippled through the lodge. Chief Addison's expression darkened. Maka, that custom has not been used in 2 generations. But it still stands as law, Maka interrupted. Any warrior can challenge for the right to marry the chief's daughter. I claim that right. He turned to face Marcus directly, pain and rage warring in his eyes. Fight me, vampire. Prove you're worthy of her. Or are you too much of a coward to face a real challenge? Marcus could have refused. Could have pointed out the absurdity of a vampire fighting a human for the right to marry. Could have noted that Nalani's choice should be hers alone, not determined by combat. But he saw the desperation in Maka's face, understood that this young man needed closure, needed to feel like he'd given everything, done everything possible before accepting defeat. I accept, Marcus said quietly. Marcus, no, Nalani began, but her father placed a gentle hand on her arm. It is Maka's right, Addison said, and Marcus has accepted. The combat will take place at noon in the ceremonial circle. The crowd dispersed, slowly, voices rising in excited speculation. Marcus found himself alone with Chief Addison and Nalani men in the emptying lodge. You don't have to do this, Nalani said urgently. Maka is acting from pain. The council would have sided with us eventually. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but he needs this. And honestly, so do your people. They need to see me in action, see what I'm capable of, and see me choose not to use it to harm. What if you lose control, she asked. What if the bloodlust takes over during the fight? Marcus took her hands in his. Then you'll know I'm not ready for this. Not ready for you, but I don't think that will happen. I've spent 50 years mastering myself. I can do this. Chief Addison had been silent watching the exchange. Now he spoke. There is something you should know, Marcus. The trial by combat is not to the death, but it is to submission. One fighter must yield completely. Given your nature, that could be problematic. I understand, Marcus said. I'll find a way. The morning hours passed in a strange blur. Marcus spent them in meditation, centering himself, preparing mentally for what was to come. Nalani came to him an hour before noon, carrying something wrapped in soft doeskin. My mother's shawl, she said, unfolding it, to reveal intricate beadwork. I want you to carry it. For luck. Marcus touched the fabric gently, feeling the love and care woven into every stitch. I'm honored. Come back to me, Nalani whispered, and there were tears in her eyes. Please come back to me. Always, Marcus promised. The entire tribe gathered in the ceremonial circle at noon. It was a large open space at the heart of the village, ringed by stones that had stood for generations. The ground had been cleared of snow, revealing packed earth beneath. Maka stood on one side, stripped to the waist despite the cold, his muscles taut and ready. He'd painted traditional warrior symbols on his chest and arms. In his hand he held a fighting staff, the wood polished smooth by years of use. Marcus stood opposite, wearing only his simple shirt and trousers. He carried no weapon. Wouldn't need one. Chief Addison stepped into the center of the circle, raising his hands for silence. We gather under the old law, he announced. 2 warriors compete for the honor of my daughter's hand. The combat continues until one yields or cannot continue. There will be honor in this fight. There will be respect. Begin. Maka didn't waste time. He came at Marcus, fast, staff spinning in a complex pattern designed to confuse and overwhelm. The first strike caught Marcus in the ribs with a crack that echoed across the circle. Marcus grunted, but didn't move, didn't counterattack. The second strike came for his head. Marcus dodged it, but barely, making it look like he'd only just avoided the blow. Maka pressed the attack, and Marcus could see the young warrior's strategy. Overwhelm him quickly, use speed and skill to make up for the difference in raw power. It was a good strategy. Against a normal opponent, it would have worked. But Marcus wasn't normal, and they both knew it. He blocked the next strike with his forearm, and Maka's eyes widened as the staff hit what felt like solid iron. Marcus grabbed the staff and pulled, yanking Maka off balance. The young warrior rolled with it, using the momentum to swing around and land a kick to Marcus's chest that would have broken ribs on a human. Marcus staggered back, playing up the impact more than necessary. They circled each other, breathing hard. Maka was fast, skilled, well-trained, but Marcus could see the limits of human endurance starting to show. "Why won't you fight?" Maka demanded, frustration clear in his voice. "Stop holding back." "I'm not here to hurt you," Marcus said quietly. "I don't want your mercy," Maka roared, launching another attack. This time Marcus met it, not with full strength, but with enough force to show what he was truly capable of. He caught the staff mid-swing, held it immobile, despite Maka's straining muscles, and looked the young warrior in the eyes. "I know," Marcus said gently. "I know you don't want mercy. You want to feel like you gave everything. So give everything, Maka. Come at me with all you have. I can take it." Something cracked in Maka's expression. All the pain, all the jealousy, all the frustrated love came pouring out. He abandoned technique, abandoned strategy, and just fought. Wild, desperate, powerful strikes that would have felled a bear. Marcus took every one. Let them land. Let Maka pour out all that emotion through his fists and his staff. He blocked the ones that might have been truly dangerous, redirected others, but took the brunt of the assault. And through it all, he didn't strike back. Not once. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the fight became something else. Became catharsis. Became therapy through violence. A young man working through his heartbreak the only way he knew how. Finally, inevitably, Maka's strength gave out. He swung one last time, the staff catching Marcus across the jaw, hard enough to snap a normal man's neck. Marcus's head snapped to the side. He tasted blood. And then, to the horror of everyone watching, he felt the hunger rise. It crashed over him like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. The scent of Maka's sweat, the elevated heartbeat, the blood pumping through nearby veins. 300 years of instinct screaming at him to feed, to take, to drink. Marcus's eyes flared red, his fangs extended. Every muscle in his body tensed for the kill. The crowd gasped. Several warriors drew weapons. Nalani's scream cut through the air. "Marcus." And that voice, her voice, pulled him back from the edge. With a force of will that made his entire body shake, Marcus pushed the hunger down, forced it back into the dark corner of his soul where he kept it chained. His eyes faded back to their normal color. His fangs retracted. He stood there trembling with the effort of control and looked at Maka, who had frozen in front of him, his staff raised for another strike he'd never deliver. "I yield," Marcus said hoarsely. The words hung in the air, impossible and final. "What?" Maka whispered. "I yield," Marcus repeated louder. "You win, Maka. You fought with more heart than I've seen in centuries. You proved your worth 10 times over." "But you could have killed me," Maka said, confused and still angry. "You could have ended this at any point." "Yes," Marcus agreed, "but that's not what this was about. You needed to give everything. You did. And I needed to prove I could take everything you had and not become the monster. I did that too." He took a step back, then another, moving toward the edge of the circle. "Nalani deserves someone who will fight for her. You are that person, Maka. I'm just a vampire trying to pretend he's something he's not." Marcus turned toward where Nalani stood at the circle's edge, her face pale with shock. "I'm sorry," he said to her. "I thought I could do this. Thought I could be what you need, but I almost lost control just now. Almost hurt someone because my nature took over. You deserve better than a monster fighting his instincts every day of his life." He started walking toward the forest, towards escape, toward the lonely wandering that had been his life for 50 years. "Stop!" Nalani's voice rang out with authority that froze everyone in place. She stepped into the circle, walking past Maka without a glance, her eyes locked on Marcus's retreating form. "You're a fool, Marcus Thorne," she said loudly enough for the entire tribe to hear. "A noble, selfless, infuriating fool." Marcus turned slowly. Nalani stood in the center of the circle, and there were tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady as steel. "You didn't almost lose control. You faced the greatest temptation of your existence, and you won. You felt the hunger, felt 300 years of instinct demanding you give in, and you said no." She moved closer, her eyes blazing with intensity. "That's not weakness, Marcus. That's not proof you're a monster. That's proof you're the strongest, most disciplined, most worthy man I've ever known." "Nalani." "No," she cut him off. "You don't get to decide you're not good enough for me. You don't get to walk away because you're afraid. I know what you are. I've always known, and I choose you anyway. She pulled something from inside her dress, a knife small but wicked sharp. Before anyone could react, before Marcus could process what was happening, Nalani drew the blade across her palm. Blood welled up bright red and impossibly tempting. No, Marcus shouted, but she was already walking toward him, hand extended, blood dripping onto the snow. Drink, she commanded. Are you insane? Marcus backed away, horror clear on his face. I could kill you. I could turn you. You could save yourself, Nalani interrupted. She was close enough now that he could smell the blood, could feel the hunger rising again like a tidal wave. You're hurt, exhausted from the fight and the control. You need blood to heal properly. So take mine. I'd rather die, Marcus said through gritted teeth, his whole body shaking with the effort of resistance. Why best I bet the way? Nalani demanded. Why would you rather die than accept help from someone who loves you? Because drinking your blood could turn you into what I am, Marcus shouted, could condemn you to an eternity of darkness and hunger and endless lonely years. Your humanity is precious, Nalani. It's beautiful and pure, and I won't be the one to destroy it. Tears were streaming down his face now, mixing with the blood from where Maka's staff had split his lip. Don't you understand, he continued, his voice breaking. I love you. I love you more than I've loved anything in 300 years. And because I love you, can't damn you to share my curse. I'd rather walk away, spend the rest of eternity alone, than risk making you into a monster. The words echoed across the silent circle. Everyone heard them. Everyone felt the raw emotion, the absolute truth of his declaration. Nalani's hand was still extended, still bleeding, still offered freely. That's it, she whispered. That's the answer. What? The prophecy, Nalani said, and her tears had turned to a smile. Don't you see true love freely given? You love me enough to choose my freedom over everything else. You'd rather die than risk my humanity. That's it, Marcus. That's the test. She pressed her bleeding palm against his chest, right over his heart. You passed. The moment her blood touched him, the moment her declaration of understanding left her lips, something changed. Marcus felt it first as warmth. Real warmth, the kind he hadn't felt in 3 centuries. It spread from where her hand rested on his chest, radiating outward through his entire body like sunrise spreading across a dark valley. The hunger vanished, not suppressed, not controlled, but simply gone. Wiped away as if it had never existed. His heart, which had beat so slowly for so long, it would barely there at all, suddenly surged to life. Beat once, twice, again and again, faster and stronger, pumping blood that felt somehow different, warmer, more alive. Marcus gasped, staggering. The world shifted around him. Colors became brighter. Sounds became richer. The cold air bit at his skin with a sharpness he'd forgotten existed. He fell to his knees in the snow, and Nalani fell with him, her hands still pressed to his chest, feeling the miracle happening beneath her palm. Your heart, she whispered in wonder. Marcus, your heart is beating. Around them, the tribe watched in stunned silence as something impossible unfolded. Marcus's skin, which had been pale and cold for 300 years, flushed with color. His eyes, which had held that supernatural gleam, softened to simple human brown. The sharp angles of his face, the predatory grace of his movements, all of it smoothed into something more natural, more mortal, more human. The transformation took only minutes but felt like hours. Marcus felt every change, felt the curse being stripped away layer by layer, felt immortality releasing its grip on his soul. And with it came pain, not physical pain, but something deeper. The weight of 3 centuries of memories, of every life he'd taken, every moment of darkness, all of it, crashing down at once without the emotional distance immortality had provided. He cried out and Nalani held him, whispering words of comfort he could barely hear over the roar of his own thoughts. Finally, mercifully, it ended. Marcus knelt in the snow, breathing hard, his heart pounding in his chest with glorious, terrifying regularity. He looked up at Nalani through eyes that were now completely, utterly human. It worked, he said, his voice filled with wonder. The curse broke. I'm human, Nalani finished, laughing and crying at the same time. You're human, Marcus. You're free. Around them, the tribe erupted in reaction. Some shouted in amazement, some in fear, some in joy. Chief Addison stepped forward, his weathered face showing rare emotion. The prophecy has come to pass, he announced, his voice carrying over the crowd. True love given freely without condition or expectation. It has broken a curse 300 years old. We have witnessed a miracle. Maka stood at the edge of the circle, staff forgotten at his feet, staring at the scene before him. Marcus looked up and met his eyes. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. I know this isn't what you wanted. Maka was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he walked forward. He extended his hand. You love her, Maka said simply. Really love her. I can see that now. Marcus grasped the offered hand and Maka pulled him to his feet. I've loved her my whole life. Maka continued, his voice rough with emotion. But she never looked at me the way she looks at you. I was angry about that. Jealous. But seeing this, he gestured at Marcus at the obvious transformation. Seeing what the two of you have, what you're willing to sacrifice for each other. I can't fight that. Won't fight that. He turned to Nalani. Be happy, he said softly. That's all I ever wanted for you anyway. Then with dignity and grace, Mackay walked away. Not in anger or defeat, but in acceptance. The crowd parted to let him pass, and many reached out to touch his shoulder, offering comfort and respect. Chief Addison moved to Marcus and Nalani, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. You have both proven yourselves, he said, proven that love can transcend any barrier, break any curse, heal any wound. If there are any among us who still object to this union, speak now. Silence, complete and absolute. Then it is decided, Addison declared. 7 days from now we will celebrate the marriage of my daughter Nalani to Marcus Thorne. Let all who wish to witness this union prepare accordingly. The crowd erupted in cheers. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and fresh snow. The village had been transformed, ribbons and garlands hanging between lodges. The ceremonial circle swept clean and ringed with pine branches. Marcus stood at the edge of the circle, dressed in clothing the tribe had made for him. Buckskin decorated with beadwork that told his story, his journey from darkness to light, from immortality to humanity, from loneliness to love. His hands shook slightly, not from cold, but from nerves. 300 years old, and he was nervous like a boy at his first dance. Chief Addison stood beside him. Breathe, the chief advised with a small smile. She'll be here. I know, Marcus said. I just can't quite believe this is real, that I get to have this. You earned it, Addison said firmly. Drums began to beat. The tribe formed 2 lines, creating a path from the largest lodge to the ceremonial circle. And then she appeared. Nalani wore a dress of white doeskin decorated with beadwork that must have taken months to create. Her hair was loose except for special braids, marking her as a bride woven through with feathers and beads. She wore her mother's necklace, a beautiful piece of silver and turquoise that caught the morning light. But it was her face that captured Marcus completely. The joy in her eyes, the smile that lit up her entire being, the absolute certainty in her expression. She walked down the path between her people, and as she passed, they touched her hands, her shoulders offering blessings and well wishes. When she reached the circle, she took her place across from Marcus. The drums quieted. Chief Addison stepped between them, facing the assembled tribe. We gather to witness the joining of 2 souls, he announced. Nalani, daughter of my blood shaman, in training keeper of our spiritual traditions. And Marcus, who has walked through darkness into light, who has earned his place among us through courage and sacrifice. He turned to Marcus. Do you swear to honor my daughter, to protect her, support her, and cherish her for all your days? I do, Marcus said, his voice strong and clear. With every breath in my body, with every beat of my heart, I swear it. The chief turned to Nalani. Do you swear to honor this man, to stand beside him, support him, and cherish him for all your days? I do, Nalani said, her voice ringing out like a bell. In this life, in whatever comes after, I choose him. Always. Kimmy, the ancient shaman, stepped forward carrying a length of braided cord. She wrapped it around Marcus and Nalani's joined hands, binding them together. As this cord binds your hands, she said in her ancient voice, so are your lives bound together. In quos, in sorrow, in plenty, in want, in sickness and health, you are one. The spirits witness this union. The tribe accepts it. Let no one tear asunder what love has joined. She stepped back, and Chief Addison raised his hands. By the power given to me as chief of this tribe, by the blessing of our ancestors, and the witness of our people, I declare you married. You are husband and wife, bound by love and honored by tradition. He smiled rare and bright. You may kiss your bride. Marcus pulled Nalani close and kissed her as the tribe erupted in cheers and ululations. He kissed her as a mortal man, with a heart that beat strong and steady, with a life that was no longer measured in centuries, but in precious, limited years. He kissed her as someone who had finally, after 300 years of searching, found his way home. 50 years later, the porch of the ranch house overlooked a valley painted gold by the setting sun. Marcus sat in his chair, weathered hands resting on worn wood, watching the light fade. His hair had gone completely silver now, his face lined with the beautiful marks of a life well lived. Nalani sat beside him, her own hair white as snow, her honey-colored eyes still bright and knowing. They held hands as they had every evening for 5 decades. Inside the house, their grandchildren's laughter echoed. 3 children they'd raised together, who'd given them 8 grandchildren, a legacy of love spreading like ripples across water. The ranch had grown over the years, becoming a meeting place between the Apache tribe and settlers moving west. Marcus had used his unique understanding of both worlds to build bridges to help people see past their differences. There had been hard years, droughts and harsh winters, sickness and loss. Their second child had died young, a wound that never fully healed. But through it all, Marcus and Nalani had stood together. Marcus looked down at his hands. Old hands, mortal hands, hands that had held his children when they were born, worked the land, built a home. "Do you ever miss it?" Nalani asked quietly, as she had so many times over the years. The power, the immortality. Marcus didn't even have to think about it. "Not for a second," he said. "I thought immortality was a gift, but it was really a curse. Living forever means nothing matters. Nothing has weight because you have infinite time." He squeezed her hand gently. "But these 50 years with you, every moment has been precious because I knew it wouldn't last forever. Every sunrise a gift, every day with you and our family, something to cherish. I've lived more in these 50 years than I did in the 300 before them." Nalani leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sun sink below the horizon together, stars beginning to appear one by one in the darkening sky. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Marcus replied. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, for believing I could be better than what I was, for giving me the chance to really live." Inside the house, their oldest granddaughter began to sing an old Apache lullaby, her voice sweet and clear. Outside, the land they'd built together stretched peaceful and prosperous, a testament to what love could create. And Marcus thought about the shaman who'd given him hope all those years ago, about Chief Addison who'd tested him, about Maka who'd eventually found his own path and his own love, and who'd become one of Marcus's closest friends, about every person who'd touched his life and helped him become more than a monster. But most of all, he thought about the woman beside him, the woman who'd been lost in a storm and found by a vampire. The woman who'd chosen love over fear, hope over certainty, a cursed immortal over every safe option. His wife, his love, his salvation. The cowboy had saved the Apache woman from freezing, and in return she'd saved him from an eternity of darkness. Some would say it was an uneven trade. 50 mortal years in exchange for 300 years of immortality. But Marcus knew better. Those 50 years held more light, more joy, more meaning than all the dark centuries combined. He'd been given a choice, gold or the chief's daughter. He'd refused both and chosen love instead. And love, real love freely given, had given him everything he'd ever needed. It had given him home,